going, everyone? Today we're going to talk about price cuts on the US housing market and talk about the states and cities with the most seller desperation, where sellers are cutting the price the most in March 2023. But before getting into that, let's look at the price cut levels as a whole on the US housing market across America. You can see that in March 2023, 17% of sellers cut the price, which is up significantly from what it was a year ago when it was only 8% in March 2022 and what it was in March 2021 when it was only 8%. And so that's good news. We have roughly double the amount of sellers cutting the price in today's housing market than we did a couple years ago. Now, the bad news is that the price cut levels are down from where they were in the fall. You can see back in October 2022, we reached a price cut share of 28%. This was probably kind of like the peak mania, let's say, of the housing crash, where most sellers were getting scared, and the price cut level has fallen since then. But what I want to point you to, everyone, is the seasonality present in this data. You can see that basically price cuts every spring and winter are fairly low, and then they increase in the late summer and fall. And so what I'm expecting going forward, as more inventory piles up on the US housing market in the spring and summer, is that we'll see this price cut level go back up, which is going to be good news for you as a buyer. However, there's huge differences between different states, different cities, different markets in terms of what's going on with this seller desperation and sellers cutting the price. We can see that it's a state like Arizona actually that has the highest share of price cuts in America. 29% of the sellers in the state of Arizona cut the price in March. That's the highest in America. In Nevada, there was also a lot of price cuts. 25% of sellers cut the price in Nevada. We can also see Florida had a pretty high share of price cuts, everyone. And then additionally, Tennessee. Tennessee is one to pay attention to, because this 22% price cut share in Tennessee, if you access the graphs functionality on Reventure App, which you guys should definitely do if you haven't yet, you can see 22%. That's double the amount of price cuts from a year ago. It's way above what it was in 2021. It's also actually the highest level of price cuts we've seen in the state of Tennessee in the entirety of Realtor.com's data set going back to 2016. And so that's a signal that something's going on in the Tennessee housing market, everyone. If we have a record number of sellers cutting the price, it's a sign that sellers believe that prices are going to go down more in the future. That's ultimately what this price cut metric tells you. You know, it's telling you what sellers are thinking and feeling in the market. And when they're feeling confident, they don't cut the price. When they're feeling desperate, they do cut the price. And a higher price cut share today compared to what it used to be is a signal that prices will be more likely to go down in your market. Now, I need to address a question in a comment that I get from a lot of you on this price cut data. A lot of you say, well, wait a minute. You know, in my local housing market, I see a bunch of sellers cutting the price by like $3,000 or $4,000. So for instance, on this listing in Nashville, you can see it's one of these smaller price cuts. $5,000 price cut, $490,000. That's only 1% price cut for this house. And as a buyer, 1% is not going to get a lot of you excited. And so some of you might be saying, well, if there's just a bunch of sellers cutting the price by a little bit, why does this data even matter? And, you know, really, that's a great question. I'm going to tell you why it matters. It's because when you look across an entire zip code, or an entire county, or an entire metro or state, if you have lots of sellers in unison doing price cuts, even if they're small price cuts at first, that's the signal of a shift in the market more towards in favor of the buyers. And when you see a big increase in price cuts, even small at first, it's a sign that into the future, that increase is going to build. It's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. More buyers are going to see the price cuts and become pickier. Other sellers are going to see sellers cutting the price and cut the price by more. And it's going to snowball, and you're going to get big price declines eventually, maybe 6 to 12 months down the road. This is exactly what happened in Austin, Texas in 2022. In Austin, the price cuts surged in the middle of the year, like in June and July of last year. And at first, people said, oh, no big deal. This is only a $5,000 price cut. Fast forward a couple months, 60% of sellers were cutting the price. And fast forward to today, prices in Austin are now down 20% from their peak. So this data is very important to understand housing markets that are crashing, but additionally also housing markets that aren't crashing. If we go back to this map on the Reventure app, www.reventure.app, we can see, these states in blue like South Dakota, Nebraska, Vermont and New Hampshire have a lower share of price cuts and thus aren't as close to seeing legitimate price declines. Additionally, if we zoom in here, we can also look at price cuts in different zip codes. If we zoom in here on a market like Columbus, Ohio, and look at the different zip codes in Columbus, we could see, there's certain areas of Columbus that have a very low share of price cuts, and there's other areas that have a higher share of price cuts. And I was actually hanging out with a friend from Columbus, Ohio this weekend, and he was complaining to me about the Columbus housing market because he was saying that he was looking to buy a house, a mid-sized house in a good school district, and he was saying that the houses are flying off the shelves with bidding wars in all the neighborhoods he's looking at, and he's getting very frustrated. And he's saying he doesn't see the housing crash and recession playing out in Columbus. And when we look again at this map of the price cuts by zip code, we can see that's true. Like in 43209, only 9.8% of listings had a price cut in March. In that 9.8%, it's actually the lowest level of price cuts in the last 7 years, according to this data from Realtor.com. Typically, it's 20% of the listings in the market have a price cut in this better school district, higher income zip code in Columbus. And so, one thing I kind of want to help you guys avoid doing as a home buyer is banging your head against the wall and getting frustrated. Because I think a lot of you are maybe looking in these good school districts, maybe for a more affordable home in a good school district, and there is a lot of competition. And so if you see in your zip code on Reventure App that there's less than 10% of sellers cutting the price, and that price cut percentage is half of what it was before the pandemic, you should know to expect bidding wars. You should know to expect that sellers have the leverage in that type of zip code. And I'm not saying don't buy in those areas, but I want you guys to be informed about what you're getting into in your neighborhood, in your city, in your housing market, and this price cut percentage helps you do that. Now, going back to Columbus, we can see not all zip codes have low price cuts. In fact, right next to that zip code in Bexley, which has low price cuts, we have another zip code, 43205, where 45% of listings have a price cut. That's 4 times higher than it was a year ago, and that's a record high in Realtor.com's data set in this zip code of sellers cutting the price in 43205 in Columbus. And so that's crazy, everyone. Neighborhoods that are right next to each other have completely different things going on in their housing market. Like a buyer in 43205 would be like, wow, prices are going down. This housing crash is happening. A buyer in the one I showed you before in Bexley would be like, there's no housing crash. There's no recession. And ultimately, this is normal for the first year of a housing downturn, everyone. Housing crashes are slow. Housing downturns are slow. The most exposed areas in terms of economic exposure, in terms of having a lot of investors, maybe lower income homeowners, maybe more home building, they're going to get hit hardest. Whereas the areas with higher incomes and maybe better economy and job prospects, they're not going to get hit right away. The recession is going to need to get worse for those areas to start going down. And so I would encourage you guys, go to www.reventure.app and go to select data point, go to click to see more and click price cut percentage and understand what it is for your state, your metro, and your zip code today and going back through history. Because I promise you, if you do, you're going to have a pretty good idea about what the environment is for you as a home buyer and whether it's more favorable for you to buy right now in the spring of 2023 or whether it's still a seller's market and you're just going to get super frustrated. And let's actually just do something real quick before signing off. What are the cities, what are the metros in America with the most seller price cuts right now? Well, let's take a look. If we go to the Metro view on Reventure App, make sure that we have price cut share selected and then go to table view, you can then see a ranking of the markets with the most price cuts. And you can see we got some smaller ones up here in South Carolina and Georgia. We got the villages in Florida. We got Austin, Texas. Go to the next page. We got Phoenix is up there towards the top, St. George, Utah, Waco, Texas, Port St. Lucie, Florida, Cape Coral, Florida, Las Vegas, Northport, Florida. So these are the areas with the most price cuts. We go all the way to the back of this list. You can then see the metros with the fewest price cuts and that are further away from a housing crash. All right, everyone, that does it for today. And I just want to let you guys know in the future, I'm going to be doing these updates on Reventure App. I'm currently building out a page on Reventure App that's going to have a feed for members with new content like videos like this, blog posts. So I'm going to have more of this content coming out for you on Reventure App, probably in about, let's just say 3 to 4 weeks later in April, early May. I'm going to be rolling that out. So keep your eyes peeled for it.